This is a quick overview on the safe operation of a Primus Autoclave with a sliding door. One of the first things you need to consider when doing any autoclaving is personal protective equipment, or PPE. As you can see, I've got my lab coat on, I've got goggles, and most critically is autoclave gloves. Use good gloves. Don't use gloves with 3 of the fingers have holes in them. Don't use a pair that's 2 right ones or 2 left ones. Use good equipment. You should also try avoiding wearing shorts or a skirt or open-toed shoes if you're going to do any autoclaving at work that day. The next thing you need to consider when you're going to come down to do some autoclaving, make sure you've got the right kind of tray. And instead of kind of going through all the different trays that are out there are plastic trays, commonly known from Nalgene. There are metal trays that are fine. But if you don't know that the tray you're using is safe for autoclaving, then you need to find out first. Either talk to your lab people or call the number on the unit, and we'll come tell you whether the pan's good or not. So when you come to the room where the autoclave is located, there's a few things you want to look for when you come into the room. First one is you're hoping to see the panels lit up. Because obviously if there's nothing on the display, there's no lights on the display, then the unit's down for one reason or another. If you need to know when it's going to be up again, you can call the contact information and we'll try to get that to you. But as you can see, the panel is lit up, it's operational, and at this point, you can go ahead and open the door. Now, even though you have an autoclave, one thing to note is that steam will build in these chambers whenever the door is closed. So when you go to open the door, some people will have a tendency to pull themselves close into the door as they're pulling down. Try to not do that, because steam will roll out the top of this and into the canopy. At the end of the unit, when you've finished autoclaving, it'll be a lot of steam. One item to note is that when we go to autoclave what we're putting in, try to always use a tray so that it contains everything you're autoclaving. The way this chamber works is it pushes steam in from the top, pushing all the air out through the strainer in the middle of the chamber. If things get out of the tray, this can get plugged. The autoclave won't open its door once it's finished. Once you've got what you need in there, center it inside. Be careful, the surfaces are all hot. You need to close the door. The door should close fairly easily. It is counterweighted, but it shouldn't take a lot of effort. If it does take a lot of effort to close the door, but it still closes, please make note of that on the sign-up sheet, because it means the gasket is starting to wear out. All right, once you've closed the door, critical thing is you want to see the little green light for door closed. It does have a switch. There are times that switch will malfunction, so that when the door is closed, that light doesn't come on. If that light doesn't come on, the unit won't start. You will need to call us, and we can come diagnose the problem, get it corrected. Once you see the doors closed, the next thing you're going to need to do is pick your cycle. Most of the autoclaves here in biology have 4 set cycles. 2 of them are for gravity cycles. 2 are for liquid cycles. And of each set of the 2 gravities, 1 is short, 1 is long. Liquids, 1 is short, 1 is long. Gravity cycles are for dry items, pipette tips, surgical gear, glassware. Liquids is as it sounds. It's for liquids that are contained in a flask, in a bottle. The reason it differentiates is how it exhausts the cycle once sterilization has been achieved. For a gravity cycle, it's going to do it very, very quickly. With a liquid cycle, it's going to do it slowly so that the temperature of the liquid doesn't rise exponentially as the pressure drops inside of the chamber, which at that point, everything inside will boil out into the pan and you won't have any product. So, for today, we'll choose a short gravity cycle because we're not actually autoclaving anything. You push the, as you can tell, you just simply push the button. It'll change what the parameters are. Come up here to number 1. The display shows you gravity, shows the amount of time for sterilization. And then it shows a dry time, which we'll talk about when we get there. The next thing you want to see once you've chosen your cycle is the magic green light on the start button. That tells you everything's in line, doors closed, cycle's been chosen, temperature is at 250 degrees. Press the start button. And you can hear the gasket being injected against the back of the door. And so right now it's trying to make sure we have a good seal. Once that's accomplished, it goes into an air purge. All autoclaves will do this. Right now, steam's coming in the top and it's forcing all of the air that was in the chamber in the bottom of the tray, inside of the pipette tip box, any air in there at all, it wants out. And so it'll take a couple of minutes for it to accomplish that. We do recommend that you stay by the autoclave until it gets to sterilization. So kind of watch it through these periods. If it's going to malfunction, it typically malfunctions within the first few cycles. So right now we'll wait for it to purge itself. You can see the chamber valve is starting to show pressure. So as we come up on it finishing its air purge, the unit then goes into a pre-vac cycle where it used pressure to remove the first amount of air, maybe 90% of the air in the chamber. Now it's going to use a vacuum cycle for a couple of minutes to remove the last 10%. Some autoclaves have more than one pre-vac cycle. Some have 2 to 1. I cannot tell you the difference. So after the pre-vac, which it just finished, if you're paying attention to the display, you'll see the temperature inside drop quite a bit during the pre-vac cycle. So the next stage is simply a heat chamber, where now it's injecting steam to bring the temperature back up to the required 250 degrees Fahrenheit. That sometimes takes a couple of minutes. It's another opportunity that if the machine's not working well, for it to take too long and it will time out. That's something we want you to write onto the sign-up sheet again. It's approaching it now. It's at 247. Sometimes it'll need to overshoot its set point of 250. But once it reaches that set point, and they're all slightly different. Gets 253 was what it was looking for, and then it kicks into sterilization. And it starts the timer for whatever time cycle you've got up here. At this point, we typically say now it's a good time to go back to your lab. You'll have a general idea of how long it will be in there, so come back accordingly. Since we're not sterilizing anything, I'm going to go ahead and advance the cycle so I can show you what happens after the timer has expired. It'll go into the next cycle, which in this case will be the exhaust. Since we did a gravity exhaust this time, the exhaust valve just simply opens up and it released exhaust at a pretty quick rate. If it was a liquid cycle, it would take maybe 3 or 4 times as long to exhaust itself, so that again it can control the temperature of the liquid that's inside the container. So we're getting ready to finish up on the fast exhaust. And then after the exhaust cycle, it will go into a dry cycle for gravity, a cool cycle for liquids. I don't know why they call it a different name. As you can see, well, you may not be able to see. Anyway, it kicks into its first post-vac, and this is just all about trying to remove the moisture and steam that's in the chamber, and to try to dry what you have in there from the condensation that forms. The final, I didn't say that fast enough. The final aspect will be air in, where it simply opens the chamber to atmospheric pressure. Next, it'll retract the gasket, which sometimes takes a few seconds. And then it'll complete itself. Can you even see the control board? As you can see, since I had advanced the cycles, it's giving us an error message because it knows that we did not let it sterilize for 25 minutes. So it's letting us know there might be a problem. So ignore that in this case. If when you're autoclaving, you see this situation, you need to call the contact number, there's a problem, and we'll need to come up and help solve it. Normally that error message will be removed by simply opening the door. As you can see, you saw that amount of steam that comes out, so keep your head, your hands away, and it reset the air. Definitely have biohazard gloves on when retrieving your load. Be aware that there could be moisture in the chamber, and there could be hot liquid in the pan, depending on what cycle and how you autoclave it. So just be very careful. Once it's out, we do like to leave the door closed to retain the heat inside and not heat the room up. And it just helps the way the unit functions. Make sure you've signed in. We are trying to put sign-up sheets by all of our autoclaves. It helps us track who's using them so we know we're trying to get money for replacements. So it's an effort for us to know who's using them, how many people are using them. And it gives you an opportunity to write down any issues that you've noticed while using the unit.